This video is going to look at estimating when you're multiplying with fractions. We're going to look at this two different ways. The first way is going to look at using a method where you get to envision chocolate bars, which is super exciting. And the second method is going to look at rounding to 0, 1/2, or 1 for each fraction. So let's take a look at the chocolate method first, because who doesn't like chocolate? So we have 1/5 of 28. Or this actually says 1/5 times 28, but a lot of times it can help if you think of the multiplication sign as the word of, because that is another way to say it. So when we have 1/5 of 28, we need to round 28 to a number that can be easily divided up into 5 pieces. And 28 is really close to 30, so that's going to be a really easy number to work with, because I know that 30 can be divided by 5. So instead of 28, I'm going to think of 30. And then I'm going to draw a chocolate bar. In this chocolate bar, 5 pieces make a whole. So I'm going to cut it up into 5 pieces. And those are totally equal, and everything's perfect, and life is happy. So I only want to know about 1/5 of these pieces, because I'm only talking about the 1 there. So I'm going to put an extra box around the part that I really care about. Now the question is, how much is this 1/5 of the chocolate bar? How much is that? So what I want to do is I want to take 30 and divide it by 5 to figure out how 30 fits into here with these 5 pieces to make a whole. 30 divided by 5 is 6. So I'm going to put 6 pieces in here, in each, or 6, the number 6 in each one of those pieces, which means that 1/5 of 30 is 6. So 1/5 of 28 is about 6. And there I have my answer. Let's take a look at 3/4 times 17. Now, what number is 17 close to that can be divided by 4? If you were to think about just plain rounding, you might round 17 up to 20. But 17 is actually closer to another number that can be divided by 4. It's actually closer to 16. So we're going to bump that down a little bit. I'm going to make my chocolate bar. It's going to have 4 pieces in it. And then when I divide those 4 pieces, the 16 whole into the 4 pieces, that's going to be 4 pieces each. And I want to know about 3 of those pieces. So I'm going to look right here. Now, 4, 8, 12. So 3/4 of 16 is 12. 3/4 of 17 is about 12. The next problem that we're going to look at is 1/3 times 7/9. Now, what you want to do when you're rounding to 0, 1/2, or 1 whole is you want to look at the numerator and compare it to the denominator. If the numerator is really, really far away from the denominator, then you're going to round to 0. If the numerator is really, really close to the numerator, if the numerator is really, really close to the denominator, then you're going to round to 1. If it's about halfway there, then you're going to round to 1/2. So if I take 1/3 and I draw my little thirds here, this is 1/2. We see that 1/3 is pretty close to 1/2. I also know that half of 3 is like 1.5. It's not 1, but it's not 2. So I know that 1 is pretty close to 1/2. So I'm going to round 1/3 to half. 7/9. 9, on the other hand, is a lot of pieces, and 7 is also a number that's close to 9. That's also a lot of pieces. So I'm going to round 7/9 to 1. So when I multiply 1/2 times 1, I'm just going to get 1/2. So 1/3 times 7/9 is about 1/2. Let's take a look at 1/9 times 4/5. When I had 1/3 up here, I rounded to 1/2 because 1/3 is really close to 1/2. Let's take a look at 1/9 though. And of course, this is going to be a perfectly drawn fraction because ninths are super easy. So if I have 1/9, you can see that that's nowhere close to 1/2. 1 is super far away from 9, so I'm going to round 1/9 to 0. 4/5, on the other hand, 4 is really close to 5, so I'm going to round that to 1. So I have 0 times 1. Well, 0 times anything is 0. So 1/9 times 4/5 is actually going to be about 0. The next problem that we're going to look at is we're going to add some mixed numbers in here, just to kind of shake things up. So what I'm going to do with that is I'm going to ignore the whole numbers at first, and I'm just going to look at the 4/5. I know that 4/5 is really close to 1. I know that because 4 is close to 5. I also know that because I just did it over here. 4/5 is really close to 1. Now that I've done that, I'm going to pull that whole number down. Now I have 3 and 1. Or I have 3 plus 1. 3 plus 1 is 4. Great. Now I have 5 and 1/6. Well, 1/6 is really not that big at all. So that's going to be 0. Pull down the 5. I have 5 plus 0. 5 plus 0 is just 5. So my new estimated problem is going to be 4 times 5. 4 times 5 is 20. So 3 and 4/5 times 5 and 1/6 is going to be about 20. One last problem to look at. 5 and 7/8 times 2/3. I know that 7/8, 7 is really close to 8, so we're going to round that to 1. Bring down the 5. I have 5 plus 1 is 6. And now I want to look at that 2/3. 2/3, I know that 2/3 is pretty close to 1/2, so I'm going to take 2/3 down to 1/2, and now I have 6 times 1/2. And I'm going to go back over here to help me with this. Take my chocolate bar, divide it into 2 pieces. I only care about one of the pieces because I'm looking at my numerator. 6 fits into this chocolate bar with 2 spots, so that means 3 of each, because 3 plus 3 is 6. So my answer is going to be 3, but it's not just 3, it's going to be about 3. So what you're going to do in the form, all you're going to worry about right now is you're going to worry about rounding 3 fractions. And those 3 fractions I want you to round are 2/11ths, 56 over 61, and the last one is going to be 5/8. And what I want you to do is I want you to tell me, what do those fractions round to? Do they round to 0, to 1/2, or to 1?